What was the second lesson God taught Peter from the vision in Acts 10? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Acts on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Acts chapter 10, verses 24 to 33, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Acts chapter 10, verse 24, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Acts chapter 10, beginning at verse 24. And the following day they entered Caesarea. Now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. As Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up, I myself am also a man." And as he talked with him, he went in and found many who had come together. Then he said to them, "You know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore, I came without objection as soon as I was sent for. I asked then, for what reason have you sent me?" So Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, and at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard, and your alms are remembered in the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa and call Simon here, whose surname is Peter. He is lodging in the house of Simon, a tanner by the sea. When he comes, he will speak to you. So I sent to you immediately, and you have done well to come. Now therefore, we are all present before God to hear all things commanded you by God. Over the last 2 lessons, we've been looking at the story of Cornelius. Cornelius is a Roman centurion, which means that he is a Gentile. Cornelius was a good man, though he had not yet heard about Jesus, so he was not a saved man. An angel appeared to him in a vision and told him to send for Peter, who was at that time in Joppa. Cornelius lived in Caesarea and obeyed the angel. Meanwhile, in Joppa, God was teaching Peter the first of 2 lessons that would enable Peter to preach to Cornelius. The first lesson had to do with the law of Moses and clean and unclean meats. Under the law of Moses, look at Leviticus 11, there were certain animals that were unclean for the Jews to eat. It would be sin under the law to do so. But Jesus had ushered in the new covenant, meaning he fulfilled the law of Moses. And even though some laws under Moses would also be the same under Christ, laws against murder, adultery, and theft, for instance, not every law would be the same. Under the law of Moses, God put a great emphasis on physical cleanness when one approached him. Under the new covenant, the focus would be on spiritual cleanness. Thus, the dietary laws and the laws that pertain to physical cleanness have been taken out of the way, meaning that Peter and Christians today do not have to observe the dietary laws of Leviticus 11. But the vision wasn't just about clean and unclean meats. There was a second lesson, a more important lesson that Peter needed to learn. By the time that Peter had seen the vision 3 times, the men sent by Cornelius had arrived at Joppa. The Holy Spirit told Peter to go, doubting nothing, for God had sent these men to Peter. All of which brings us down to verse 24. Peter had left Joppa the day after seeing the vision, and it took him another day to get to Caesarea, showing us that the journey, even though it doesn't look too far on our map, takes part of 2 days to complete by walking. When Peter arrived, lo and behold, Cornelius had called together his relatives and close friends to hear Peter, showing us the kind of man that Cornelius was. He didn't just want salvation for himself, he wanted it for others too. And he was a man of influence, that he could convince these people that they should want salvation for themselves as well. At the sight of Peter, Cornelius fell down at his feet and worshipped him. This was not just a simple greeting or a show of respect. This was actual worship. Peter was an apostle of Jesus, but he wasn't God, so he wouldn't accept worship. This teaches us again that only God is deserving of worship. No idol and no person like the Pope or a preacher is deserving of such. Peter continues by telling Cornelius that he needs to understand that under the law of Moses, it would have been unlawful for him to keep company with or go to one of another nation. I have scoured the Old Testament trying to find where God had said this, and I couldn't find such a command. What appears to have happened is that the Jews, following captivity, had perverted what Ezra said in Ezra chapter 9, verses 11 and 12, which reads, "Which thou hast commanded by thy servants the prophets, saying, The land unto which you go to possess it is an unclean land, with the filthiness of the people of the lands, with their abominations, which have filled it from one end to another with their uncleanness. Now therefore, give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever, that you may be strong and eat the good of the land, and leave it for an inheritance to your children forever." Note here that the prohibition was against marrying the people of the land, seeking their peace, in other words, making covenants with them, or seeking their wealth. It had nothing to do with associating with Gentiles, even though one could infer from that passage that that is what God meant. That kind of inference, though, is not what is called a necessary inference, but an unnecessary one. This tradition is one that the Jews had, and one that God needed to break among the Christians if the gospel was to go out to the whole world, and the whole world be united under Christ. There was to be no distinction of Jew and Gentile under Christ. Everyone was saved the same way and was to live in harmony. This is the second and most important lesson that God was teaching Peter in that vision, that he needed to preach among the Gentiles and needed to regard them as worthy of the gospel and salvation if they would come to faith in Jesus, for God had cleansed them. This lesson would be a stumbling block for many Jewish Christians in the first century, as we will see in our future lessons in the New Testament. After telling Cornelius this, Peter wanted to know why he was sent. He wanted to know what Cornelius knew, so that Peter would know from where he had to begin preaching in order for this man to come to faith in Jesus. Such is true when we preach today. With some people, they believe they have obeyed Jesus already, but have not, so they need to be taught the scriptures more accurately. Others have no idea who the real God is, so we must start there before ever getting to Jesus. Cornelius explained how 4 days earlier he had been praying. He saw an angel who directed him to send for Peter in order to know what God had commanded. Cornelius explained that he and all present there now were ready to know all the things commanded of God. And that is where Peter will begin his sermon, a sermon we will cover, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Acts chapter 10, verses 34 to 48, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.